Good day, my friends, and welcome to my channel, The Black Bandit. Now, before we get started, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe for more content. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the Great Escape from Alcatraz. For those of you that do not know, Alcatraz was one of the top ultimate max security prisons established on 1934. What makes this prison so famous is that it was built on a small rocky island located about 1.25 miles offshore from San Francisco Bay, California. So this prison was surrounded by the cold, rough waters of the Pacific Ocean, and its design included tougher iron bars, strategic positioning of guard towers, very strict rules and procedures, with dozens of inmate checks daily. Alcatraz, or what some may call it, the Rock, housed some of the most dangerous and infamous gangsters such as Al Scarface Capone, George Machine Gun Kelly, James Whitey Bulger, and Harlem drug kingpin Ellsworth Raymond Bumpy Johnson. During the years that this prison was open, 36 men tried 14 separate escapes, but nearly all were caught or didn't survive the attempt. But the fate of 3 particular inmates still remains a mystery to this day. Now, if there ever was an inmate that was destined to escape Alcatraz, it was Frank Lee Morris. Frank Lee Morris had spent a lifetime navigating the prison systems before his arrival to Alcatraz. From his infant years until his teen years, he was sent from foster home to another, and at the age of 13, he was convicted of his first crime. By the time he reached his later teens, Morris' criminal record would include a multitude of crimes ranging from narcotic possession to armed robbery. He basically became a professional inhabitant of the correctional system. Prison officials had credited Morris as possessing superior intelligence, and he earned his ticket to Alcatraz by building an impressive resume of escapes. Now, if Frank was going to pull off this great escape, he was going to need to team up with a few equally acquainted partners. So he teamed up with John and Clarence Anglin, who were brothers, and Alan West. All 3 of these brothers had been incarcerated at the federal penitentiary in Atlanta when they first became acquainted with Morris. And John and Clarence were eventually sent to Alcatraz following a sequence of attempted escapes. Alan West, who occupied the adjacent cell, was serving a second term at the Rock or Alcatraz and carried a reputation as an arrogant criminal. He knew John Anglin from the state penitentiary in Florida. Now that Frank had all his accomplices, he was ready to start his great plan to escape Alcatraz. This plan was extremely complex and involved the design and fabrication of ingenious lifelike dummies, water rafts, and life preservers fashioned from over 50 raincoats that had been acquired from other inmates, some donated and some stolen. It would also require a variety of crudely made tools to dig with and to construct the accessories needed for the escape. By May 1962, Morris and the Anglin brothers had already dug through the cell's 6 by 9 inch vent holes and had started work on the vent on top of the cell blocks. Now, this work took some time. The inmates alternated shifts with one working and one on the lookout. They would start working at 5:30 p.m. and would continue all the way to 9 p.m. just prior to lights out. Meanwhile, John and Clarence started fabricating the dummies' heads and even giving them pet names like Oink and Oscar. The dummy heads were very basic but lifelike and were constructed from a homemade cement powder mixture that included materials such as soap and toilet paper. And they decorated them with fresh tone paint from prison art kits and human hair from the barbershop. Using the stolen glue from the glove shop, the inmates also started working to cut and bond the raincoats into makeshift rafts and life preservers. Each evening, following the completion of their self-imposed work detail, they would hide the materials on top of the cell block to minimize any chance of being caught with the contraband. The inmates also acquired an elaborate array of handmade tools. West was able to lift an electric hair clipper while working on a paint detail in the barbershop, and he used the clippers along with the drill bit stolen from the industries by another inmate to fashion a makeshift motorized drill. However, that motor had proven to be too small. Thus, the project would require more effective equipment. By a stroke of good luck, West had recently learned that the prison vacuums had broken. He was permitted to attempt the repair, and while inspecting the machine, he found that it had 2 motors. He carefully removed one and was able to get the other to working, thus deflecting suspicion. So now Morris and the Anglin brothers were able to use the vacuum motor for their drill. They attempted to drill out the roof ventilator, but with only limited success. The motor proved to be too noisy, and it was not very effective. After months of long preparation, the inmates had completed fashioning all the gear they needed for their escape, and they continued working to loosen the ventilator grill on top of the cell house. John Anglin carefully completed the valve assembly on a large 6 by 14 foot raft, while Morris modified an accordion-like musical instrument, which would be used to rapidly inflate the raft. But while the others had progressed well in their various preparations, West had fallen behind in digging out the ventilator grill at the rear of the sail. His primary role was to construct life preservers and special wooden paddles for the raft, task which didn't require him to leave his cell. On the night of June 11, 1964, Morris indicated that the top ventilators were loose enough and he felt that they were ready to attempt to escape. At 9:30 p.m., immediately after lights out, Morris brought down the dummies from the top of the cell block and announced that the escape would be staged that very night. Clarence Anglin had attempted to assist West in removing his ventilator grill by kicking it from outside the cell in the utility corridor, but his efforts were not successful. Morris and the Anglin brothers would have no choice but to leave him behind. The inmates made their final 30-foot climb up the plumbing to the cell house roof, traveling 100 feet across the rooftop, and then carefully maneuvering down 50 feet of piping to the ground near the entrance to the shower area. This would be the last anyone that saw Morris and the Anglin brothers. Now, West finally completed the removal of the grill and climbed to the rooftop, but by then, all the other inmates had disappeared, and with no raft or other means of escape, he was forced to return to his cell. In a later interview, West said that their plan had been to use the raft to make their way to Angel Island, and after resting for a while, they would re-enter the bay on the opposite side of the island and swim through a waterway called Raccoon Straits, then onto Marin. They then would steal a car, burglarize a clothing store, and then venture out into their own separate directions. For decades, there's been speculations on whether the escape attempt was successful. The FBI spent several years investigating and later resolved that the inmates' plans had failed. Due to following only a few of the key points resulting from the investigation, there were no reports of a stolen car or a burglary from a clothing store within a 12-day period following the escape. None of the men had relatives or friends in the area that could help them or support them financially or assist with the escape. Now, critics on the other side of the debate claimed that the fact that no bodies were found was proof that the inmates had made it successfully to the mainland. But the reality was that it was fairly common for people to perish in the bay waters, never to be found again. In fact, on the very night of that escape, there was an African-American man that was reportedly down over a failed relationship, abandoned his car mid-span on the Golden Gate Bridge and jumped to his death in front of a bunch of eyewitnesses. And despite the quick response from the Coast Guard, his body was never recovered. And it was stated that the bay water temperatures ranged between 50 to 54 degrees. And exposure to that element would cause the body to go into shock over a period of time. And also, personal items carried by the inmates were found floating in the bay the following day, along with the life preserver with heavy teeth marks on the bow. On July 17, 1962, a Norwegian freighter ship departing from Pier 38 heading to Canada had reported seeing something bobbing in the water, so a crew member used his binoculars to confirm seeing a body face down floating 20 miles northwest of the Golden Gates. He also stated that the body was clothed in a full-length denim trouser that appeared identical to prison-issue uniforms, but failed to report this until October of that year. So the FBI determined that this would be one of the most significant leads in the case. Now, the Anglin brothers' families had stated that the escape had been a topic of the family's discussion for several years. None of them had ever been contacted by the brothers, but they felt that the men would have made contact with them in some form if they survived. And this is just a side note, the Anglin family would soon suffer yet another tragedy. The third brother, Alfred, was executed while attempting to escape from Kelby Prison in Montgomery, Alabama in 1964. To this day, this is still a mystery of the escape. Over millions of visitors each year make the trip to Alcatraz to witness firsthand the scene of the crime. Over decades of investigating, the FBI concluded that there were more key findings that the escape was a fail, rather than finding evidence that would suggest that the inmates made it to freedom. In the end, there was never any credible land-based evidence that would lead to a positive outcome for these inmates. All right, that's the end of this story. Let me know in the comments what you think happened to Morris and the Anglin brothers. Do you think these guys made it to freedom, or do you think their bodies, well, bones now, are at the bottom of the Pacific somewhere? Please don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. I will be posting at least 3 to 4 stories every week. Thank you, and stay mysterious, my friends.